What if the weakest person in the world could make everyone around him unstoppable?
That's not a hypothetical. That's exactly what happened when a boy named Art received a class no one had ever heard of and changed everything.
His name was Art, 17 years old, standing on the steps of the 47th Guild in 3 weeks.
47 doors, 47 rejections, and every single one of them came down to the same thing.
The status crystal in his hand read, Coordinator. Not warrior, not mage, not healer, not anything the world of Arcania had a name for.
A single word that no registrar in the kingdom had ever seen on a class list.
A word that no guildmaster knew what to do with.
The Silverblade Guild Hall looked exactly like the 46 before it. Quest board, registration desk, adventurers at their tables, the smell of beer and leather.
Art placed this crystal on the counter. The device flashed blue. The class appeared on the screen.
The registrar read it, blinked, and called for the guildmaster.
A broad-shouldered man with 2 swords at his belt emerged from the back room, a former A-rank adventurer, the kind who had seen everything.
He looked at the crystal. He looked at Art. A 17-year-old boy, average build, no mana aura, no combat pressure.
He asked if Art could fight. Art told the truth. In direct combat, nearly useless. But he could make any team 3 times more effective.
The guildmaster placed the crystal back on the counter and pushed it toward Art.
He said he needed warriors, not advisors.
Art took the crystal.
47. He walked out onto the steps and stood there while Velmore moved around him, merchants calling out, adventurers heading south toward the dungeon paths.
2 guys in academy uniforms passed by. One recognized Art and nudged the other. Both laughed.
Former classmates. One had become a fire knight, the other a battle mage.
Both had been accepted into guilds on the very first day after the ceremony had the Altar of Destiny.
Art had stood before that same altar 1 year ago, waiting for the stone to glow and show him his future.
The stone had glowed, but instead of the usual list, a single word appeared on its surface.
Coordinator.
The priest frowned. He read the inscription twice. Then he reached for the class registry, a thick leather-bound book with 1,000 pages.
He leafed through it for 15 minutes. There was no coordinator in the registry.
The hall fell silent. Art's mother clasped her hands in the 3rd row. His father stared straight ahead.
The priest announced the class aloud and added that he couldn't find it anywhere, which meant one of 2 things.
The class was so rare that records had never been kept, or so useless that no one had bothered.
The entire hall assumed it was the latter. Art remembered walking home that day and opening his status window and reading his skills for a long time.
Tactical map, command link, synergy boost, weakness analysis.
Every single skill was about other people. Not one was about him.
He couldn't throw fireballs. He couldn't lift a 2-handed sword one-handed. He couldn't heal wounds with a touch.
But he could see something no one else could. He could see how broken parts fit together into a working mechanism.
The problem was that a mechanism needed parts. Parts meant a guild, and no guild would take someone without a combat class.
The circle was complete, and it trapped him for a year.
He visited every guild in Velmore, all 15, then 12 guilds in Creighton, 10 in Marmor, 10 in Whitehall.
Everywhere the same answer. No combat application. Not suitable. Good luck.
47 rejections. And now Art walked down the steps of the last guild on his list, heading toward the central square.
He was passing the Rusty Cauldron Tavern when he noticed the crowd.
About 20 people standing in a semicircle, staring at something in the center.
A man of about 24, tall, broad-shouldered, short dark hair, a scar across his left eyebrow.
And an empty left sleeve, the arm missing from the shoulder down.
The man stood in front of the Iron Wolf Guild's bulletin board, reading the job openings. In his right hand, he held a shield, a large infantry shield with a worn coat of arms. A young man in an Iron Wolf uniform was talking to the crowd, loudly, making sure the one-armed man could hear him.
He said this one had come for the third time, been turned down for the third time. He asked when the man would realize that a one-armed defender wasn't a defender, but a burden.
The crowd laughed. The man with the empty sleeve didn't turn around. He kept reading the board.
Art stopped, his skill activated on its own.
A tactical map unfolded in his mind. He saw the stranger's status window bloom into view.
Cain, age 24, class, defender, rank C, awarded 3 years ago. Current status, guildless.
Physical stats above average, even accounting for the missing arm. Skill, unbreakable wall, active. The ability to double the shield's durability while holding position.
Art looked at Cain and saw what no one else in that crowd could see.
Everyone saw a disabled man. Art saw the perfect tank.
A defender doesn't need 2 hands. A defender needs a shield and a position. Cain held the shield in his right hand. His stance was flawless, center of gravity low, feet shoulder-width apart. He wasn't just standing. He stood like a wall. A second hand with a sword would only force him to attack, and a defender must not attack. A defender must stand. Art walked forward. The crowd parted. The Iron Wolf man went quiet.
Art stood before Cain and said he didn't need a guild from that list.
Cain turned and looked down at him, a full head taller. He asked what Art needed.
Art replied that he needed his own guild, and the first person he wanted was Cain.
Cain stared at him in silence for 5 full seconds.
Then he asked what Art's class was.
Art answered, Coordinator.
Cain didn't laugh. He didn't ask what that meant.
He just nodded and asked where the guild hole is.
Art said they didn't have one yet.
Cain tucked the shield behind his back and said they should find one. A coordinator without a guild, a defender without an arm. 2 people no one had wanted.
They walked together down Valemore Street, and Art thought about how 47 rejections had led him exactly here.
One strong warrior is just one warrior. 10 outcasts in the right combination are an army.
All that remained was to find the other 9. They walked to the warehouse district on the outskirts of the city, where old barns and abandoned workshops line the narrow lanes.
Art stopped in front of a crooked shed with a caved-in roof. Cain looked at it, then back at Art.
He asked if Art was serious.
Art replied that the rent was 2 copper coins a month, all the money he had.
Cain pushed the door open. It fell inward. A cloud of dust rose. Inside was empty, except for a broken workbench and a hole in the roof, letting in sunlight.
Cain went in first. He leaned his shield against the wall and turned back to Art.
He said things had been worse. Art followed him in. The guild hall. Just a shed, but it was a start.
Tomorrow, he would go find the others, the people no one wanted, the people the world had written off as trash. He would find them and show them their worth, because he was the only one who could see it.
The morning began with part of the roof collapsing directly onto the spot where Cain had been sleeping. He rolled out in time and covered himself with his shield. Planks and tile shards struck the metal and scattered.
Cain stood up, brushed off the dust, looked at the new hole in the ceiling, and said now they had 2 windows to the sky instead of 1.
Art had already been awake for hours, sitting against the wall with a notebook on his lap. In the notebook was a list, names and classes, every outcast in Arcania he'd heard of over the past year. He had gathered this list from taverns, rejection boards at city halls, conversations with innkeepers and merchants. Every city had such people.
The invisible, the unwanted.
The first name on the list was underlined twice.
Lyra, 16 years old. Class, tailor. Blind from birth. Lives at the Temple of Mercy in the lower quarter.
Art had seen her 6 months ago, mending a torn cloak for an adventurer without being able to see the fabric, only feel it with her fingers.
But that wasn't what caught his attention.
The threads had glowed, Barely noticeably, the weaver class allowed Lyra to weave mana directly into the fabric.
The adventurer hadn't noticed. Art had. Through weakness analysis, he had seen what those threads really were. Magical ropes that could become invisible traps, snares strong enough to bring down something weighing a ton.
Lyra didn't know she could do that. No one knew, because no one saw a seamstress as a fighter.
Art closed the notebook and stood up. It was time to go find her.
Cain walked to Lyra's right through the streets of Velmore, making sure she didn't stumble.
She didn't stumble once. She felt the ground beneath her feet better than most people who could see. Next on the list, Grom, a half-orc standing 2 meters and 10 centimeters tall, hauling grain sacks at the city market, 4 at a time, 320 kilograms, carried like empty bags.
Porter, deaf from birth. The world had decided that deafness was a death sentence for an adventurer.
Art had decided something different. His command link didn't work through sound, it worked through a direct mental link.
Grom wouldn't hear the monster scream, but he would hear Art's voice in his head, for the very first time in his life.
When Art explained this through gestures and slow speech, Grom's hands began to shake. Not from fatigue, from something else entirely.
The half-orc who had lived his entire life in silence had just learned that someone could speak to him.
He nodded once, heavily, decisively, and that was all the answer Art needed.
The fourth recruit was Pip, 12 years old, class cleaner. Art found him in the back alleys of the Rusty Cauldron Tavern, sweeping the pavement with a broom twice his own height.
An orphan. No family, no home, no shoes that weren't falling apart. He worked for food and a place to sleep. The cleaner class granted him 2 skills, dust cloud and cleaning. Everyone thought it was a joke.
Art didn't think so. A dust cloud stirring up fine particles across a 10-meter radius wasn't a cleaning tool.
In combat, it was a blinding smokescreen capable of cutting an enemy's vision to nothing.
When Art told Pip he needed someone with the cleaner class, Pip looked around for the people who were about to laugh.
There was no one, just Cain with his shield, Lyra with her threads, and the enormous Grom with a sack of belongings.
Art said Pip wasn't a cleaner. He was a combat tactician for smoke operations.
Pip didn't fully understand what that meant, but he dropped his broom and followed them because no one had ever told him before that he was needed. The fifth was old Mora, 67 years old, class cook. Art found her in the kitchen of a soup kitchen for the poor, stirring a cauldron the size of a barrel with a ladle she held like a warhammer. Before Art could finish his first sentence, she cut him off and said she knew who he was, the guy who walks around collecting cripples. Art confirmed it, then explained what her food actually did. A 20% strength boost, health regeneration, increased stamina. Not just cooking, alchemy through heat and ingredient. Mora snorted. She said she knew that, but guilds wanted healers with golden hands, not an old woman with a ladle. Art said his guild wanted exactly that, an old woman with a ladle. Mora looked at him for a long moment. Then she took off her apron and threw it on a hook by the door. She said fine, but if anyone complained about her cooking, she would leave. Art promised no one would complain.
6 people stood in the barn that evening. Art, Cain, Lyra, Grom, Pip, Mora.
1 coordinator, 1 one-armed defender, 1 blind tailor, 1 deaf porter, 1 12-year-old cleaner, and 1 67-year-old cook. Not a single standard combat class between them. Mora went in first, looked around, and announced there was no kitchen. Art replied there wasn't one yet. Mora replied that the first quest should be raising money for a kitchen.
Art opened his notebook and wrote it down. Kitchen. Priority number 1.
He looked at his team. 5 people the world had written off, standing in the dilapidated shed, waiting on him. Art said that tomorrow they were going to City Hall to register the guild. He already had a name. The Outcasts. Cain smirked. Lyra tilted her head. Grom nodded. Pip's eyes went wide. Mora said the name was silly but honest. Art didn't argue. He'd chosen it deliberately.
so every client and every enemy would remember exactly who they had underestimated. The next morning at Velmore Town Hall, Art placed the completed registration form on the counter in front of a thin man in glasses.
Guild name, the Outcasts. Rank F. 6 members. Guild Master, Art. Class, Coordinator.
The official took the form, read it, reached the section listing member classes, and paused. He read it again. Then he took off his glasses, wiped them, put them back on, and read it a third time.
A defender with no arm, a tailor with no sight, a porter with no hearing, a 12-year-old cleaner, a 67-year-old cook, a coordinator with no combat skills.
The official looked up and asked if this was a joke.
Art replied that it was not.
The official said he couldn't formally refuse. Arcanian law allows any class holder to establish a guild with at least 5 members and a registration fee.
The fee was 10 silver coins. Art placed exactly 10 on the counter. His last money.
Cain added 5, Mora 3. Art borrowed the rest from an innkeeper on the promise of cleaning his cellar.
The official accepted the payment and affixed the seal.
The Outcast Guild. Rank F. Registered in the city of Velmore. Art took the document and went back outside. The 5 were waiting on the steps. He held up the paper with the seal. Pip jumped. Grom clapped his hands. Cain nodded. Lyra smiled. Mora said the piece of paper was nice, but they still didn't have money for dinner.
Art led them to the task board inside Town Hall. F-rank quests hung at the very bottom, gathering herbs, delivering packages, clearing pests.
Art chose the rat quest. Grunwald's Winery. 20 silver coins to clear the cellar of rats.
Simple enough that no real guild would waste time on it. For the outcasts, it was their first mission.
They arrived an hour later. Grunwald, a fat man who smelled of wine vinegar, looked at Art's group and asked if they had the wrong door.
Art showed his guild document. Grunwald shrugged and opened the cellar.
The staircase dropped into darkness, mold and damp stone. Art activated his tactical map.
200 meters of underground space, barrel racks, corridors, and 37 red dots. Not ordinary rats. Art zoomed in and froze. Dungeon rats, the size of a dog, fangs as long as a finger, poisonous tails, E-rank threat rating. Each one individually weak. 37 together was a problem even for a D-rank team.
Grunwald either didn't know what was down there or had deliberately underpaid.
Art turned to the team, closed his eyes, and activated the command link.
For the first time, voices appeared in all 5 heads simultaneously.
Cain flinched. Lyra tilted her head, listening. Grom froze, eyes wide.
He heard a voice, for the first time in his life. Not sound, not vibration, a pure thought formed into words.
Grom raised his hand and touched his temple. He looked at Art and slowly nodded.
Art transmitted the plan through the link in images and directions and positions.
Cain holds the central passage with a shield. Not one rat passes him. Grom blocks the left passage. His mass alone is enough. No weapons needed. Just stand.
Lyra stretches threads across the right passage, 10 centimeters above the floor. The rats run in and tangle.
Pip raises a dust cloud in the main hall, fills the rats' eyes and noses, strips them of their senses.
Mora waits upstairs with hot soup to restore health and counter the poison if anyone catches a tail strike. The plan took 30 seconds to explain. Everyone understood it the first time because the command link carried not just words, it carried images, positions, and the full picture of every person's role.
They went down. Art held the rear, watching everything through the map, adjusting positions in real time.
Cain stood in the central passage, feet rooted to the stone, shield forward. Grom filled the left passage completely with his shoulders.
Lyra crouched by the right and began pulling threads, thin, invisible, barely visible even on Art's map.
Pip stood in the center of the hall, took a deep breath, and activated his skill.
Dust rose from the stone floor, dirt, fine particles, a cloud that filled the hall from floor to ceiling.
Visibility dropped to 0.
Art didn't need visibility. He had the map.
37 red dots sprang into motion. They poured from cracks and burrows on all sides. 5 rats the size of dogs slammed into Cain's shield simultaneously. He didn't move a centimeter.
Unbreakable wall. The shield doubled in durability. The rats bounced back. Cain stepped forward and crushed the nearest one with the lower edge of his shield. On the left, 3 rats tried to squeeze past Grom. He raised 1 foot and brought it down. 400 kilograms of lifting capacity meant the blow landed like an anvil. The rat was flat.
On the right, the rats flooded the passage and flew straight into Lyra's threads. Magical ropes caught their paws and tails.
6 rats tangled and thrashed in place. Lyra tugged the threads and tightened the knots. They couldn't move.
Pip's dust was doing its job. The rats in the center darted blindly, crashing into barrels and into each other.
Their poisonous tails lashed through the air, but no one from the team was in the cloud. Everyone held their positions at the entrances. Art fed adjustments through the link. Cain, 2 steps right. There's a crack in the wall and 3 more coming through it. Grom, hold position. They'll come to you. Lyra, prepare the second line of threats. Pip, shift the cloud left. There's a blind spot. 7 minutes. 37 dungeon rats. 0 casualties, 0 injuries, 0 potions.
When the dust settled, dead rats lay in neat piles by each passage.
They went upstairs. Grunwald peered into the cellar, and his jaw dropped.
He asked how long they had been down there. Art replied, 7 minutes.
Grunwald said the last D-rank team had spent 2 hours and come out with 3 bitten.
He counted out 20 silver coins and then added 5 more on top without being asked.
25 silver coins, the outcast's first income. Mora was waiting at the entrance with a pot she had cooked on a camping stove right on the street.
They sat on the winery steps and ate. The soup was hot and thick. Art felt his fatigue recede. Mora's recovery buff at work.
Pip ate 3 servings. Mora grumbled, then poured him another.
Cain ate in silence. Lyra held her bowl with both hands and smiled. Grom gave Mora a gesture, meaning it was delicious. Mora nodded. The first quest was done.
Art opened his notebook. Quest number 1. Grunwald's basement. 37 dungeon rats. 7 minutes. 0 casualties. Reward, 25 silver.
He closed the notebook and looked at his team. 6 outcasts on winery steps with soup bowls in their hands, and their first win behind them.
This was only the beginning. Word spread through the lower quarter in 2 days, not because it was a great feat, but because Grunwald told every wine customer the same story.
A guild of 6 people, a one-armed man, a blind girl, a deaf giant, a child with a broom, an old woman with a pot, and a boy without a weapon, had cleared the cellar in 7 minutes without a scratch.
Grunwald told it with the face of a man who wasn't sure he believed it himself. Most of his listeners didn't believe it either, but the cellar was clean and the 25 silver coins were very real. For the next 3 weeks, Art took on assignments every day. Only F rank. Rats, deliveries, herbs, escorting a caravan to the neighboring village. Small work routine, but Art used every mission as a training ground for testing combinations. On the herb gathering mission, Lyra sent threads into the grass to feel for the right stems, while Pip's dust cloud cleared the thickets. A 2-hour task done in 30 minutes. Guarding the caravan, Cain and Grom on either side of the wagon. 2 bandits came out of the forest, saw a one-armed man with a shield and a 6-foot half-orc, and turned around and went back. The task was completed without a single blow struck.
Money piled up slowly. Mora cooked from the cheapest ingredients. They slept in the barn. Pip found old blankets at the dump. Lyra mended them until they looked almost new.
After 3 weeks, the guild had 120 silver coins and a reputation. Small, local, but a reputation. Grunwald recommended them to his friends. The baker hired them to clear raccoons from his attic. The blacksmith asked them to deliver an order over the hill. Every client told the next one the same thing. Fast, clean, cheap. A strange guild, Strange people, but they work like clockwork.
In the 4th week, a man arrived at the barn.
A young man, 22 years old, shoulder-length black hair, pale skin, dark circles under his eyes.
A black stripe ran from his wrist to his elbow on his left arm. Not a tattoo. A curse.
Art activated the tactical map. Zane. Age 22. Class, Fallen. Skills, Dark Strike, Aura of Fear, Curse Redirection. Status, Cursed. Magic Power High. Dark Mana Type.
Art knew who Zane was. All of Velmore did.
A former cadet of the Knight Academy, top of his class. The Fallen class meant the altar had marked him with a dark brand, a black stripe on the hand, an aura that instilled unease in everyone nearby, dark mana that corroded ordinary weapons.
3 guilds had accepted him. 3 guilds had expelled him when members began complaining of headaches and nightmares.
Zane stood at the barn entrance and didn't step in. He said he'd heard about this guild and had come to look, not to join, just to look. Art walked out to meet him and looked at the black stripe on his arm.
Weakness analysis told him the truth. The curse constantly emitted a dark aura, causing discomfort in ordinary people. But the skill Curse Redirection allowed Zane to aim that aura at a single target instead of scattering it in all directions.
He could turn the curse into a weapon. He just hadn't had someone to tell him where to point it.
Art told Zane that his curse wasn't a disease, it was a projectile. He just hadn't had a cannon to load it into. Until now.
Zane went quiet. Then he asked if Art was afraid of his aura.
Art replied that his command link protected his mind from external influence while focused. He didn't feel the aura at all, and he could teach the others to block it through the link.
Zane stepped inside.
Mora glanced up from her cauldron. Pip hid behind a barrel. Lyra turned her head toward the newcomer's direction. Grom simply nodded, unbothered. The dark aura worked through emotion, and Grom had spent a lifetime filtering a world without sound. Cain walked in from the yard. He saw Zane and stopped.
They knew each other. 2 years ago, on a raid in the Dark Dungeon, Cain had lost his arm. Zane had been on that same raid, in a different group. They hadn't spoken, but they knew.
Cain nodded. Zane nodded back. 7 people?
Art updated the list on the wall. 7 names, 7 classes. Coordinator, Defender, Tailor, Porter, Cleaner, Cook, Fallen.
Not a single standard combat class. Not one mage, not one archer, not one healer.
But Art looked at that list and saw a machine.
Cain was the tank. Grom was the wall in the battering ram. Zane was a ranged fear weapon. Lyra was traps and area control. Pip was concealment and reconnaissance. Mora was buffs and recovery. And Art was the processor running it all.
A week after Zane's arrival, Art made a decision. It was time to try something serious.
On the quest board at City Hall, he found what he was looking for.
Stone Fang Dungeon. Rank C. Reward 300 silver. 5 floors. Boss on the final floor, a stone golem. C rank. Recommended 6 D rank members or 4 C rank. The Outcast Guild was ranked Beth.
Frank guilds could accept quests up to D rank, with town hall permission. C rank required a special petition.
Art filed the petition. The bespectacled official recognized him, shook his head, and said the rules were the rules. The petition would take a month to review.
Art walked out of City Hall and bought. Then he found a different path.
Stonefang was open to any adventurer at their own risk. An official quest with a reward required authorization, but entering the dungeon required nothing but courage or calculation.
He assembled the team and laid it out. No official quest, no reward from City Hall. The reward would be different. If an F-rank guild cleared a C-rank dungeon, the rules of Arcania granted an automatic promotion, skipping intermediate ranks. Mora said it was madness. Cain said he was in. Grom slapped his fist against his palm. Lyra nodded. Pip swallowed and didn't back down. Zane said nothing. He just checked the straps on his gloves and stood by the door.
Art opened his notebook and began drawing the dungeon from a 10 silver map bought off a retired adventurer.
5 floors. First, stone beetles, weak, numerous. Second, stone wolves, fast and packs. Third, stone guards, humanoid with weapons, D rank.
Fourth, traps. Few monsters, but the walls and ceiling could kill you. Fifth, the boss, stone golem, C rank, 4 meters tall, 2 tons, stone regeneration. Art calculated every corridor, every position, every possible angle for every team member.
When he finally went to bed, Pip was already asleep, curled under a patched blanket. Lyra sorted threads in the dark. Cain polished his shield. Grom lay staring at the stars through the roof hole. Zane sat alone in the far corner, so his aura wouldn't disturb their sleep.
Tomorrow, they would either emerge as something new or not emerge at all.
The entrance to Stonefang was a rocky fissure in a hill 3 hours south of Velmore, wide, dark, claw marks on the moss-covered rocks. Art stopped the group 100 meters out and activated the tactical map.
First floor visible almost in full. 43 red dots, stone beetles. F-rank threat, but clustered in 3 groups of 12 to 15 each. He relayed the plan through the command link. Move fast, no lingering. Cain leads, shield clearing the path. Grom behind him, carrying supplies. Lyra and Pip in the center. Zane at the rear. Mora next to Art. No splitting under any circumstances.
They went in. Darkness closed around them.
Pip raised a cloud of dust particles and made them glow. His skill could control fine matter in the air. Mora's pre-mission breakfast had given everyone a night vision buff. 2 abilities that meant nothing separately. Together, they gave the whole group light and vision without a single torch.
The beetles came in 3 waves. Each wave met Cain's shield first, then Grom's boots.
The third group massed at the passage to the second floor. Lyra sensed them through a thread she sent along the wall. Vibration, movement, 12 ahead. Art gave the word to Pip, a dust cloud into the passage. The beetles went blind and began crashing into each other. Cain walked straight through, without slowing.
First floor clear. 20 minutes.
The stone wolves were waiting on the second floor, 8 of them, larger than common wolves, stone hide, quartz fangs, hunting in coordinated packs.
Their standard tactic, 2 corner the prey, while the rest strike from the flanks.
Art deployed an unconventional defense. Cain stood in the corridor's narrowest point, where the walls converged. His shield filled the passage.
The wolves lunged, all 8. Their flanking tactic was useless in the tight corridor. They could only attack head-on, and standing in front of them was an unbreakable wall.
The first wolf hit the shield and flew back. The second caught the edge of the shield in the snout. The third tried to leap over Cain, and Lyra had been waiting for exactly that.
A thread stretched a meter above his head, caught the wolf mid-air, and wrapped around his neck. Lyra held on. The thread held. The wolf thrashed, but couldn't break free.
The remaining wolves backed away, grouped, and growled.
Art gave the command to Zane.
Zane stepped forward and focused the curse directly at the pack. Not scattered, a concentrated beam. 5 wolves froze. Aura of fear. 4 seconds of paralysis. 4 seconds was enough. Grom rushed past Cain, carrying a 100-kilogram stone block he had pulled from the floor. He swung it at the paralyzed pack. The block crushed 2 wolves outright. The others snapped free and ran. Lyra caught one more in a thread. Cain finished the last against the wall.
Second floor clear. 35 minutes.
Art stopped the group. A short rest. Mora handed out rice balls, each one carrying a different buff, tailored to each person. Art received a concentration boost. His tactical map sharpened, details clearer, outlines more precise, movements more defined.
Cain got regeneration. The wolf claw marks healed within a minute. Grom received a strength boost. His monstrous capacity grew by another 20%.
Lyra received enhanced sensitivity. Her threads could now detect vibrations from 20 meters. Pip received endurance. His clouds could last longer. Zane received precision. The curse became more focused and no longer drifted toward allies.
6 different buffs from a single cook.
each one calculated for a specific person and role. Mora knew her job. The third floor opened with an ambush. 12 stone guards, 2-meter humanoids of solid rock, armed with swords, axes, and spears. D rank. They stood along the hall walls, disguised as columns, waiting. Art warned the team through the link before a single step entered the hall. 12 guards along the walls, pretending to be pillars. They'll activate when we reach the center. We will not go to the center. He repositioned everyone. Cain and Grom filled the doorway shoulder to shoulder. Art ordered Pip to send a cloud into the hall at maximum density.
The guards came to life. They started moving. But in the cloud, they couldn't see their target. Their primitive minds reacted to movement, and there was none. Cain and Grom stood motionless in the doorway.
Ard counted the seconds and ran weakness analysis across all 12 guards at once.
Guard 1, right knee joint, cracked stone. 1 clean blow, and the leg falls off. Guard 2, base of the neck, the stone thinner there. Guard 3, center of the back, an old chip.
Every guard had a vulnerability. Art relayed each one through the link to the person best positioned to exploit it.
Cain stepped forward. Shield to the first guard's knee. The stone cracked. The leg snapped. The guard fell. Upper edge of the shield to the second's neck. The head flew off.
Grom, third guard from the left. Crack in the back. Walk through it. Grom punched through the stone. The guard came apart.
Lyra, fourth and fifth are close together. 1 thread around all 4 legs. Lyra sent the thread sliding across the floor. Both guards fell. Cain finished them on the ground.
Zane, 3 in the far corner. Focused aura strike. Dark energy hit the corner. Black fissures spread through the stone bodies. And 5 seconds later, all 3 crumbled into rubble.
Grom rammed the remaining 4 in a single charge. 2 flew, 2 stayed standing. Cain and Zane took those.
12 D-rank guards. 4 minutes. 0 casualties. Art wrote it down.
The 4th floor was the most dangerous before the boss. Not monsters, but traps. Collapsing panels, arrow slits in the walls, pendulum blades, a lowering ceiling. Art led the way, his tactical map flagging anomalies in the floor and wall structure, red zones, yellow zones. He guided the group 1 step at a time, like a chess player moving pieces across a board he alone could see.
Lyra sent threads forward along the floor. Each thread that touched a mechanism gave her a vibration reading she relayed to Art, who updated the map.
Pip kept a light dust cloud near the ceiling. The dust settled into the arrow slits, making them visible.
40 minutes. Every trap bypassed. Not 1 arrow flew, not 1 panel collapsed.
Before the 5th floor, Art stopped the group for a final rest. Mora handed out the last round of buffs, maximum preparation.
Art sat on the stone floor and closed his eyes.
Behind the door was a single enormous red dot. The stone golem, C rank, 4 meters, 2 tons. Stone regeneration that closed damage in 10 seconds.
There was no point striking it unless you could hit the same spot faster than it could heal.
Art activated weakness analysis, but the door was still between them. He needed 30 seconds of observation within 50 meters, and that meant the first 30 seconds of the fight would be blind. 30 seconds against a C-rank boss with no target data.
Art opened his eyes and looked at his team. He stood up and sent 1 word through the link.
Time.
Grom shoved the stone door. It burst open with a crash.
The 5th floor hall was enormous, ceiling 10 meters high, polished stone floor. Standing in the center was the golem, 4 meters of gray stone, arms like logs, legs like columns, eyes 2 red crystals in a stone skull.
The ground shook beneath its footsteps as it turned toward the door.
Art began counting. 1 second. 2. 3. He needed 30.
He called through the link. Hold him for 30 seconds. Do not attack. Just hold. Cain lunged forward, shield up. The golem swung a fist the size of a human torso. Cain crouched. The blow passed over his head.
He rolled. The golem spun. A second strike. Cain took it on his shield. Unbreakable wall. The shield held. Cain slid back 3 meters and planted his feet.
Grom threw a stone fragment at the golem's back. The golem didn't react.
Zane fired his aura. Black cracks appeared across the stone. Regeneration sealed them in 2 seconds. The curse didn't penetrate. The stone was too thick.
18 seconds. Lyra cast threads at the golem's right leg and pulled. The threads tightened like wires. The golem took 1 step. The thread snapped. Too strong. 23 seconds. Pip raised a massive cloud. The hall went dark with dust. The golem stood in the center, spinning, searching for targets.
28, 29, 30.
Weakness analysis complete.
The information flooded in. Stone golem. Regeneration rate 10 seconds per standard damage. Weak point, core. A magic crystal inside the chest cavity. Size of a fist. 20 centimeters left of center. Depth, 30 centimeters of stone.
Destroy the crystal. The golem crumbles.
But 30 centimeters of solid stone? No one on the team could punch through that depth.
Cain's shield repelled. It didn't pierce. Grom hit blunt. Zane's aura was regenerated faster than it could damage. Pip and Lyra couldn't damage stone at all.
Art thought for 3 seconds.
Then, he saw it.
He transmitted the new plan through the link in one burst. Images, positions, assignments, simultaneous to all.
Lyra threads on the golem's right wrist. Not the legs, the arm. The wrist is the thinnest point. 20 threads at once. Secure the ends to the column.
Lyra flung a bundle of threads. They coiled around the golem's right wrist, and she pulled taut, anchoring the ends. The golem jerked. The column groaned, but held. The right arm was locked.
Grom, left leg. Grab and hold your full weight against it.
Grom charged and seized the leg with both hands, hanging on with everything he had. 400 kilograms of dead weight. The golem couldn't step forward. Zane aura into the chest. Not to destroy, to weaken the stone. 10 seconds of continuous flow. Zane concentrated. The black stripe on his arm blazed. A continuous stream of dark energy struck the golem's chest. Regeneration fired, but Zane pressed without a break. The cracks multiplied, spread, overlapped. The stone didn't break, but it thinned. A web of black lines covered the chest surface.
Cain, center of chest, 20 centimeters left. Shield strike, maximum force. Unbreakable wall at full power. Pierce 30 centimeters of weakened stone.
Cain took 3 steps at a full run. He leapt.
Shield forward, skill activated to maximum. The metal glowed white. The blow landed square on the weakened section of the chest. The stone exploded into shards. The shield drove 30 centimeters deep.
A crunch. A crack. The shield struck the crystal.
The crystal shattered.
The golem froze. Its red eyes dimmed. 2 seconds of absolute silence. Then 4 meters of stone crashed to the ground and scattered into rubble.
The dust settled. Cain sat in the debris. His shield was bent but intact. Grom dusted off his shoulders. Lyra wound up her surviving threads. Pip stood with his mouth open. Zane breathed hard, the black stripe on his arm pulsing. He had spent everything.
Mora entered the hall last. She looked at the mountain of rubble, then at Art. She said dinner would be ready in 10 minutes and that no one was complaining about porridge because porridge was all there was. No one complained.
They sat in the defeated boss's hall and ate from travel bowls. 7 people, Frank Guild. They had just cleared a C-rank dungeon.
Art took out his notebook. Stone Fang Dungeon. 5 floors. Total time, 1 hour and 42 minutes. 0 casualties. 0 serious injuries. C-rank boss defeated by a combined assault from all 6 members.
He closed the notebook and looked at his team. Cain repaired his shield straps. Lyra wove new threads. Grom ate his 3rd bowl of porridge. Pip had fallen asleep directly on the rocks.
Zane sat in the corner staring at his hand. The black stripe had grown slightly thinner. He had used the curse to its fullest for the first time, and it had not consumed him. It had obeyed him.
Mora gathered the dishes and grumbled that the porridge had burned.
Art smiled. Tomorrow, the whole city of Velmore would learn what 7 outcasts had done in under 2 hours.
And then things would really begin.
They returned by noon. At the southern gate, a guard recognized Cain. The one-armed man with a shield was hard to miss.
The guard asked where they were coming from. Art replied, Stonefang.
The guard looked them over. 7 people, not one on a stretcher, not one in bandages, and smirked. He said they must have made it to the first floor and turned back.
Art didn't argue. The proof was in Grom's bag.
Shards of the stone golem's core, a boss crystal, glowing red, pulsing with residual magic. There was only one way to obtain such a crystal.
Kill the boss.
Art led the group straight to City Hall. The bespectacled official looked up, recognized Art, and watched as Art placed the crystal shards and the completion report on the counter.
The official held a shard to the verification artifact. It lit up. Authenticity confirmed. Stone Golem, boss of Stone Fang Dungeon. C rank, destroyed.
The official took off his glasses, wiped them, put them back on, looked at the artifact again, and then at Art.
He said it was impossible.
Art replied that it had happened. Here was the proof.
The head of the registration department was summoned. She examined the shards, read the report floor by floor, party composition, descriptions, timings.
She said that under Arcanian rules, a guild confirming a dungeon clear 2 ranks higher than its current standing received an immediate promotion, skipping intermediates.
Frank clearing a C dungeon was a 3-rank gap. That meant an immediate jump to D rank, with the right to accept quests up to B.
She stamped the new certificate. The Outcast Guild. Rank D. Registered in the city of Velmore.
The news spread through City Hall within an hour. By evening, the entire lower quarter knew. By morning, all of Velmore.
An F-rank guild of disabled people and misfits had cleared a C-rank dungeon in under 2 hours without a single casualty.
The merchants of the lower quarter rejoiced. Grunwald gave them free wine. The baker Weiss brought baskets of bread. Ordinary people saw it as a kind of fairy tale, the small defeating the large.
The 3 major guilds of Velmore reacted differently.
Silverblade, Iron Wolf, Red Spear, all B rank. Each had cleared Stonefang in standard groups of 8, taking 3 to 4 hours, with casualties, with wounded.
7 people without a single combat class had done it faster and cleaner.
That wasn't just embarrassing. It was humiliating.
On the 3rd day after their return, a visitor arrived at the barn.
A man in expensive leather armor with a gold clasp on its cloak. 2 guards in full plate armor stood behind him.
Art activated the map. Class, Knight of Light. A rank, high threat level.
He recognized the description. Terran, Deputy Guildmaster of the Golden Dawn. Lord Valyrian's right hand. One of the 20 strongest adventurers on the continent.
Terran surveyed the barn, the hole in the roof, the broken workbench serving as a table, the walls covered with tactical diagrams, Mora's cauldron in a corner, blankets on the floor.
He looked at Art and said, Lord Valyrian was inviting the Guildmaster of the Outcasts for a conversation at noon tomorrow, the main hall of the Golden Dawn.
Art asked what the conversation was about. Terran replied that Lord Valyrian would explain in person. He left. The guards followed.
Art stood in the shed and fought. Golden Dawn, the finest guild on the continent. S rank, 300 members, their own palace in the center of Velmore, a seat on the Royal Council.
Their Guildmaster, Lord Valyrian, former commander of the Royal Army, strategist, politician, a man who believed power must be organized and subject to order, and that those who disrupted that order were a threat to it.
Art had known Valyrian would take notice eventually. He hadn't expected it this soon.
The next morning, Art put on his best clothes, clean shirt, intact pants,
a leather belt Lyra had mended so the seam was nearly invisible.
Cain offered to come. Art refused. If Valyrian wanted to intimidate him, showing up with backup would only signal weakness.
He had to walk into an S-rank guild's lair alone and stand there as though it were his territory.
Cain said that was stupid. Morris said it was very stupid. Pip said Art was brave.
Lyra said nothing. She handed Art a thin string and tied it around his wrist. If he tugged it 3 times, she would feel it, and they would come.
Art nodded and laughed.
Golden Dawn occupied an entire city block. White marble, 4 stories, golden crests on the walls, stained glass windows. 2 A-rank guards at the entrance. They didn't stop him. They were expecting him. Inside, the space was broad and bright. A quest board the size of a house wall, lined with missions from F to S. Adventurers moved in groups, all in elite gear, all projecting mana pressure.
Knights of Light, Archmages, Holy Healers, Blade Masters, the entire elite of Arcania in a single building.
They were looking at Art, at his plainclothes, at the absence of weapons, at the void where a mana aura should have been.
A murmur moved through the hall. That's the one, the crippled guildmaster, the one who cleared Stonefang.
Art didn't slow down. He climbed to the 4th floor. One door, heavy oak with a gold handle. He opened it and walked in.
Valyrian's office was the size of the entire outcast barn. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the whole city, a massive dark wood table. A man in his 50s sat at the table, silver hair slicked back, posture rigid and straight, eyes gray and cold, a formal suit, not armor, but through the tactical map, Art could read the truth.
Lord Valyrian, class Knight of the Dawn, unique subclass Knight of Light, S rank, critical threat level.
This man could level the outcast barn with a single blow and everyone inside it.
Valyrian studied Art for 5 silent seconds. Then he said he was impressed. Stonefang in 2 hours. That was serious, even for a D-rank team.
Art replied that it took 1 hour and 42 minutes.
Valyrian raised an eyebrow slightly. Then he said something no one in Arcania had said before.
He said he knew what the coordinator class was.
Art went still.
Valyrian said the registry only contained classes from the past 300 years. A coordinator appears once every 500. The last was 480 years ago, a man named Morgan the Unifier.
Morgan gathered an army of peasants and craftsmen and defeated a demon invasion from the Dark Continent.
Then his own generals killed him, because they feared his influence.
Valyrian stood from the table and walked to the window. He said a coordinator wasn't just a tactician. It was someone who made the weak strong, and that was the most dangerous ability in the world.
Because the strong know their place, but the weak who have suddenly become strong know no limits.
He turned to Art and laid out his offer. Art would disband the guild. His people would receive positions in the Golden Dawn, not as fighters, but as support staff. Good pay, security, stability. Art himself would become a tactical consultant with access to all Golden Dawn resources.
It was a generous offer, very generous. Valyrian wasn't threatening, he was proposing, elegantly, logically. Why build something in a shed when you can work in a palace?
Art looked into those gray eyes.
He said no.
Valyrian asked why.
Art replied that support staff was just another word for servants. His people weren't servants, they were adventurers. They had cleared a C-rank dungeon. They deserved to stand in the front row, not mop the floors for those who stood there.
Valyrian was quiet. Then he nodded. He said he understood, and that this was a mistake.
He said Arcania operated by rules, the strong at the top, the weak at the bottom. Not cruelty, order. And when someone tried to break that order, the world resisted.
Art replied that the world didn't resist. Those at the top resisted because they feared that someone more worthy might end up at the bottom.
Valyrian smiled for the first time, subtly, without warmth.
He said he liked Art,
But liking wasn't enough. From this day forward, he said, the Golden Dawn would be watching the outcasts, and if they crossed his line, he would stop them. Not out of hatred, but because he believed it was right.
Art turned toward the door. He stopped at the threshold.
He said he would be watching too, and that lines have a way of shifting.
He left the office. He descended the stairs. He walked through the hall past hundreds of the continent's strongest adventurers.
He stepped outside onto the street. He turned the corner, and only then did he exhale. His hands were trembling, but the string on his wrist was still untouched.
He hadn't pulled it once.
2 months passed. 2 months of relentless work. Art hadn't let the team rest for a single day. Every morning, tactical training. Wooden figures on a homemade map, running through scenarios. What if the tank goes down? What if traps split the group? What if enemies attack from 3 sides at once? Every team member had to know not just their own role, but everyone else's.
And over those 2 months, 8 new people had joined. Thorn, 20 years old. Class, gardener. He could accelerate plant growth and control roots within a 5-meter radius. Everyone assumed this was farming work.
Art saw instant walls, trip lines under enemy feet, and living barricades that regrew faster than they could be cut down.
Nera, 23. Class, glassblower. She materialized glass objects from thin air. Fragile, everyone said. Useless. Art saw glass spikes, fragmentation grenades, lenses that focused light into a cutting beam, mirrors that reflected magical attacks. Quill, 18. Class, cartographer. He drew maps that updated in real time. Combined with Art's tactical map, it created a dual view of the battlefield.
Art saw through mana. Quill saw through space. Together, nothing was missed.
By the end of the 2nd month, the guild stood at 15 members. Not one standard combat class. All misfits. All outcasts. All more dangerous than anyone could have imagined.
23 quests in 2 months, all D to C rank, all completed without casualties. City Hall promoted them to C rank in the 7th week.
Money came in steadily. Art rented a 2-story house on Blacksmith Street. 1st floor for training and common space, 2nd floor for living quarters.
Mora finally had a real kitchen. Stove, cutting board, shelves for spices. She didn't smile. She never smiled.
But she stopped grumbling for half an hour. For Mora, that was the equivalent of tears of joy. Cain received a custom shield. Light alloy, enchanted for durability. 40 gold coins. Almost the entire guild's 1st month budget. Lyra received a set of high-quality magic threads, 3 times the low tolerance of her old ones. Grom received heavy gauntlets, 10 kilograms each, which only added to the weight behind his blows.
Pip received his first new clothes. He wore them for a week straight without taking them off.
Zane received gloves of enchanted leather that helped channel and contain the curse's flow. The black stripe stopped pulsing at night. For the first time in 3 years, he slept without nightmares.
But not everything went smoothly.
In the 9th week, Art returned from a mission to find the guild hall door smeared with red paint.
The message read, "Cripples should know their place." Art wiped it off and said nothing to the team. The next day, Pip came back from the market with a black eye. He said he had fallen.
Art looked at him through weakness analysis. It was a punch mark, the size of an adult fist.
Lyra quietly said she had overheard 2 men in red spear uniforms at the market discussing how they needed to teach the kid from the Freaks Guild a lesson.
Red Spear, B-rank guild. Guildmaster Dorak, former mercenary, rough, direct, intolerant of anything that disturbed the established order.
Art wanted to go to Dorak and demand an explanation. Cain stopped him.
He said that was exactly what they were waiting for, a provocation. If Art showed up with complaints, it proved the pressure was working.
They needed to show the opposite.
Art agreed. He waited. 3 days later, the Red Spear took on a quest in the Iceborough Dungeon. A group of 10 entered in the morning.
By evening, they hadn't returned. By the next morning, still nothing. City Hall sounded the alarm.
A rescue operation was needed. 3 guilds drew lots. Art came to City Hall and put the outcasts forward.
Officials exchanged glances. A C-rank guild on a rescue mission in a B-rank dungeon? Formally, they had the right, but the Ice Bro was different from Stonefang, not in monster level, but in conditions. Sub-zero temperatures, icy floors, blizzards inside the corridors, 0 visibility. Standard tactics didn't function in such an environment.
The head of the registration department looked at Art and asked if he was certain. He said yes. She signed the authorization.
Mora cooked hot soup with a cold resistance buff, 30% boost to resilience, lasting 3 hours. Everyone drank 2 servings. Lyra treated her threads with a special compound so they wouldn't freeze and become brittle. Pip practiced controlling snowflakes instead of dust particles. Same skill, different material, and it worked. Zane confirmed his curse's effectiveness in the cold. Dark mana generated its own heat. In fact, it performed better in sub-zero conditions.
Grom put on a warm jacket and looked unbothered.
They entered the dungeon. The cold hit like a wall. Walls of blue ice, slippery floors, icicles on the ceiling. Fog cutting visibility to 20 meters. Art activated the map. 3 floors. First, ice wolves, nearly invisible against the white background. And on the second floor, 10 yellow dots. Alive, but weak. The Red Spear survivors, trapped in a side hall surrounded by 12 ice guards. 2 days without food or warmth at minus 25 degrees. They were alive, but not for much longer. Art accelerated the pace. First floor cleared in 15 minutes. Cain pushed ice wolves back with his shield. Grom punched through icy walls with his fists to create shortcuts. Lyra stretched threads across the slippery corridors. The wolves slid straight into them. Pip swirled snowstorms to block the enemy's sightlines. Zane burned through anything that got too close with dark mana that melted ice on contact.
Second floor. 12 ice guards roamed outside the side hall where the Red Spear fighters were barricaded.
Each guard was S rank. The team couldn't handle 12 simultaneously in direct combat. Art looked at the narrow corridor leading to the hall. Low ceiling, walls of ice, long and tight. He laid out the plan through the link. Lyra, threads across the corridor, 10 layers from floor to ceiling, every 20 centimeters. Turn it into a cutting grid. Pip, drive the guards into the corridor with a snowstorm from inside the hall. Grom, stand at the far end as the decoy. Stomp the floor. The vibrations travel through the ice. They'll follow the sound. Cain waits at the corridor exit and finishes off whatever makes it through. Zane, full aura at the ceiling of the hall. Melt the icicle fastenings. Let what's above come down on whatever stays behind. Pip burst into the hall in a blizzard. The guards turned toward the corridor. Grom stomped. Boom, boom. The vibrations pulsed through the ice floor. The first guard ran into the corridor and hit Lyra's threads. 10 layers of magical wire cut through the ice body. It came apart.
The second, the third, 4, 5. They ran into the grid one after another, fast and mindless, each one falling to pieces at the exit.
7 guards destroyed. The remaining 5 realized the corridor was a trap and turned back, straight into Zane's surge. Dark energy slammed the hall ceiling. 2-meter icicles crashed down. 2 tons of ice from above crashed 3 guards. Cain and Grom handled the last 2 in 30 seconds. Art approached the blocked entrance to the side hall. Grom cleared the debris in a minute. Inside, 10 Red Spear fighters sat frozen, starving, wounded. Their leader, Dorak, was propped against the wall with a broken right leg. 2 others lay unconscious. Dorak raised his head and saw Art. He recognized him, the one from the crippled guild.
Art said nothing. He turned to Mora.
Mora was already pouring hot soup from a travel thermos. Warmth buff, regeneration buff. She handed a portion to each person. Pip helped those who couldn't hold a bowl. Lyra bandaged wounds with threads that held cuts tighter than ordinary bandages. Cain propped Dorak up, a man a full head taller and twice as heavy, with one arm, like a pillar.
They led all 10 of them out of the dungeon.
A crowd was waiting at the entrance. Guards, city hall officials, adventurers from 3 guilds, all watching as 7 people from the outcasts brought 10 fighters from the Red Spear out alive.
Dorak stood leaning on Cain. He looked at Art. He wanted to say something.
Art raised the hand. He said it wasn't necessary. They hadn't done it for words. They were adventurers. It was their job.
He turned and led his team back toward Velwar.
15 people, not one standard class. They had just rescued the same elite fighters who had beaten their 12-year-old teammate a week ago. Art didn't look back.
The rescue of the Red Spear changed the balance of power in Velmore quietly but completely.
Dorak didn't thank them publicly, too proud for that. But the beating stopped. The graffiti stopped. The Red Spear left the outcasts alone. The other minor guilds went quiet.
It's hard to mock the people who pulled you out of a dungeon. But the silence in the streets didn't mean silence at the top.
A week after the rescue, Art received a letter with the official seal of the Royal Council of Arcania. The wording was formal and calm. The Royal Council was considering a bill to restrict guilds with non-standard compositions from accepting missions above C rank.
Non-standard composition: any group where more than 50% of members hold classes outside the official combat registry.
The law had not yet been passed, but it had been submitted for consideration.
Art didn't need to guess who the writ meant.
Valyrian hadn't lied. He had warned that he would act, and he had. Not through violence, not through street gangs or paint on walls.
Through the law, through the system, through a mechanism that couldn't be hit with a shield.
If the law passed, the outcasts would be frozen at C rank forever. No B missions, no A raids, no path to the grand tournament.
A ceiling, a glass ceiling, written into the kingdom's law.
Art sat at the table in the guild hall, rereading the letter. Cain stood behind him and read over his shoulder. He said it was over.
Art replied that it wasn't. The law hadn't been passed yet. It would be reviewed in 2 months. 2 months was enough time. Cain asked how.
Art said the only path was to rise so high that the law looked absurd. If the guild completed A-rank quests before the law passed, it would be hard for the council to explain why it should restrict those who performed better than any elite group in Arcania.
They needed a breakthrough. Loud, fast. Art searched the quest board for 3 days. Not just any A rank. He needed one that others had turned down. A quest that looked impossible. He found it. Blood Abyss Dungeon. A rank. 7 floors. The Bloody Reaper as the final boss. An A-rank demon with regeneration and a debuff aura.
3 months earlier, a 20-member Silver Blade team had entered. 14 came out. 6 died on the 6th floor. They never reached the boss.
After that, the dungeon was declared a restricted zone, awaiting an S-rank special team that was never assembled.
The reward had been sitting on the board for 3 months, 1,000 gold, plus anything recovered from within.
Art took the quest off the board. The city hall official looked at him like a man watching someone walk toward a cliff.
She reminded him that 6 out of 20 B-rank fighters had died inside. Art said he knew. She asked how many people he was taking.
Art replied,
15. The entire guild.
She shook her head and signed the authorization.
Art spent a week preparing. He bought the Silver Blade's failure report for 20 gold, half his monthly budget.
The report was thorough. Floor-by-floor descriptions, monster types, trap locations, and most critically, a description of how 6 people had died on the 6th floor. Acid geysers, the floor covered in cracks that shot jets of acid at random intervals, impossible to predict by timing. The Silver Blade had sprinted. 6 of them hadn't made it.
Art studied the hall layout for 3 days. He wasn't looking for a pattern in time. He was looking for a pattern in space. The geysers were arranged in a specific grid. Between them, dead zones, narrow strips of floor where the acid couldn't reach. If you knew the route, you could walk through without rushing. The problem was that the route was 20 centimeters wide at its tightest. For 20 people moving in chaos? Impossible.
For 15 people walking in single file on precise coordinates delivered through the command link, it was doable.
Art held 3 training sessions in the guild hall. He drew a grid on the floor in chalk and walked the team through it, step by step. Left foot 20 centimeters forward. Right foot 15 centimeters right. Stop. Wait 2 seconds. Continue.
3 days later, 15 people could walk the grid with their eyes closed. On the 4th morning, they set out for the Blood Abyss.
6 hours into the mountains, the entrance was a crevice between 2 rocks, swirling with red mist that smelled of iron and sulfur.
Inside, the first 3 floors were filled with blood elementals, magical creatures of congealed blood that grew stronger by absorbing each other.
Standard weapons passed through them like water. Fire magic vaporized them, but they condensed within a minute.
Zane walked at the front beside Cain. He didn't fire full blasts. He aimed thin, dark mana beams directly into each elemental's core, a small magical cluster at its center.
Art saw the targets through weakness analysis and relayed coordinates. Beam, splash, puddle. The elementals came apart without a fight.
3 floors in 1 hour. No injuries.
The 4th floor was a labyrinth of walls made entirely of bone, interlocked skeletons forming corridors that shifted every 5 minutes.
The Silver Blade had spent 4 hours here and gotten lost twice.
The outcasts spent 20 minutes. Art's tactical map tracked positions. Quill's cartographer skill recorded every structural shift, predicting the maze's reconfiguration 2 moves ahead.
They walked through passages that hadn't closed yet, entered corridors that had just opened. The maze couldn't keep up with them.
5th floor, the Blood Knights. Former adventurers consumed by the dungeon, their bodies encrusted in dried blood, fighting with the training of soldiers and the endurance of the dead. 20 of them, B rank each.
Art assembled the control layer before a single knight could reach the team.
Thorn knelt and pressed his palm to the stone. Seeds sprouted through the cracks. Roots threaded across the hall. Thin, tenacious, not strong enough to stop a B-rank knight, but enough to snag a foot and steal half a second.
Nura exhaled and spread her arms. Glass spikes materialized and rained across the center of the hall, thousands of tiny points that pierced the soles of armored feet and threw the knights off balance.
Lyra wove threads knee-high across the entire hall into a net. Pip poured everything into a single cloud, maximum density, wall to wall. 0 visibility. The knights charged toward the entrance. They hit the threads, stumbled, fell onto the glass, and Cain stepped forward into the chaos.
Those who bypassed the traps met Zane, a flash of the aura, 1 second of paralysis, and Grom's fist.
20 Blood Knights, 11 minutes, 5 minor cuts from blood blades. Mora had healing buffs distributed before the wounds could deepen.
6th floor, the acid geysers. Art positioned the team in single file and transmitted every step through the link.
Left foot, 15 centimeters. Stop. Geyser. Wait. Now. Right foot, 20 centimeters forward. Stop. 3 seconds. Continue.
40 meters of acid-laced floor, 12 minutes to cross it. Not 1 drop of acid touched any of them.
The Silver Blade had lost 6 people here. The outcasts passed through without a mark.
7th floor, the Bloody Reaper.
A circular hall with a ceiling 20 meters up, blood flowing down the walls in magical streams. The boss stood in the center, 3 meters of gaunt red skin, arms ending in 30-centimeter claws, a scythe of congealed blood in one hand. Art activated weakness analysis and ordered everyone to keep distance and hold for 30 seconds without attacking. The Reaper was fast, faster than anything the team had seen. The scythe whistled. Cain took the blow on his shield and was knocked back 5 meters. Mora reached him immediately. The clock in Art's head ticked.
Zane struck with his aura. The Reaper absorbed dark energy and grew stronger. The curse fed him. 15 seconds. Lyra tried threads around the Reaper's legs. 1 step, they snapped. 23 seconds. Pip raised a massive cloud. The Reaper spun in place, lost.
30. Analysis complete. Weakness, the heart. Inside the chest, behind a magical barrier drawing power from the bleeding walls. To break the barrier, stop the walls from bleeding. To stop the bleeding, seal every crack simultaneously.
Art sent the command through the link. Lyra, the walls, every crack, sew them shut. Like you mend cloth, like you patch those blankets in the barn. Same hands, same threads.
Lyra raised both hands. Dozens of threads flew outward in all directions and drove into the stone around the cracks, pulling the edges together, stitch by stitch. Thorn's roots pushed into the walls from within, sealing the larger gaps. Nera created glass patches for the ones too wide for thread.
Meanwhile, Cain and Grom and the others circled the Reaper in constant movement, not attacking, just occupying his attention. 15 scattered targets moving on Art's coordinates.
The Reaper swung from one to another and couldn't catch anyone.
4 minutes later, Lyra finished the last stitch.
The walls stopped bleeding. The Reaper froze. His body trembled. His red skin paled. The magical barrier around his heart flickered and collapsed.
Art shouted one name through the link.
Cain. He ran with everything left in him. 3 steps, full speed. He leapt. Shield forward, unbreakable wall activated to its maximum, the metal blazing white.
The shield drove straight through the Reaper's unprotected chest. The barrier was gone. The stone was gone. Only flesh and the heart behind it. A crunch. A crack. The Reaper let out a sound like iron tearing and began to come apart. Blood fell to the floor and seeped into the stone. 10 seconds later, all that remained of the bloody Reaper was his scythe. Pip shouted with joy. Grom pounded his chest. Thorn sat on the floor and laughed. Nera was crying. Mora grumbled that a scythe covered in blood was unhygienic.
Cain stood with his arms still outstretched, shield lodged in the wall behind where the Reaper had stood. He turned to Art.
He said, "Not bad for a bunch of cripples."
Art looked at his team. 15 people. They had destroyed an A-rank boss in a dungeon where 6 elite B-rank fighters had died.
Not because they had been the strongest, because a tailor had sewn the dungeon walls shut, because a cleaner had blinded a demon with smoke, because a gardener had plugged stone cracks with roots, because a glassblower had sealed gaps with shards.
Trash classes, useless skills. In the coordinator's hands, they had done what no Knight of Light could have managed alone.
The news of the Blood Abyss hit Arcania like a thunderclap. Not just Velmore, the entire continent. An F-Origin guild of 15 people with no standard combat classes had cleared an A-rank dungeon where 6 elite fighters had died 3 months earlier. 0 casualties.
The Guild Herald ran it on the front page. 7 floors, 4 hours and 12 minutes. The A-rank boss destroyed. The headline that stuck, The Rejects, a guild that shouldn't exist.
Within a week, 47 people arrived at the guild hall, all with trash classes, all outcasts from across Arcania.
A lantern bearer who could create light from nothing. A girl who controlled water, but only dirty water. An old man whose clockmaker class could slow time within a 1-meter radius for exactly 3 seconds.
A painter who could change the color of any surface. A bell ringer who created sound waves.
Art spent 3 days conducting interviews. He looked at each one through the tactical map and weakness analysis.
Not everyone was suitable. Some were too broken. Not physically, but inside. Years of humiliation had stripped the will from them. Art could show a person their potential. He couldn't want it on their behalf.
Out of 47, he accepted 28. The guild grew to 43 members. Art reorganized the structure. 3 operational groups of 10, plus reserves and support. Each group led by a core member. Cain's first group, Assault and Frontline Defense.
Zane's second group, long-range strikes and reconnaissance. Lyra's third group, traps and territory control. Mora commanded the supply department, with 3 new cooks she trained like a sergeant training recruits.
City Hall promoted the guild to B rank after the Blood Abyss. 2 more months, 11 B rank missions completed. City Hall promoted them to A rank.
5 months. F to A. An Arcania record. The previous record had been held by Golden Dawn. 3 years.
Lord Valyrian had founded his guild 20 years ago. He had spent 3 years reaching A rank. Art had done it in 5 months.
And Valyrian knew it.
The law restricting non-standard guilds was put to a vote the week after the outcast's promotion. The Royal Council meeting was held behind closed doors.
Art had no access to that room, but he had a source. Selena, a childhood friend, a member of the Golden Dawn, arrived at the guild hall late at night, hood up, face hidden. She didn't want to be seen there.
They hadn't spoken in 6 months. The last time was at the Academy ceremony, the day she received the Wind Healer class. Rare, powerful. Golden Dawn accepted her the same day.
Art offered her tea. Mora brooded without being asked, then left the room grumbling that she brewed but received no thanks.
Selena smiled, then went serious.
The council had voted. The law restricting non-standard guilds had not passed. 7 in favor, 8 against. 1 vote.
But it wasn't a victory. Valyrian had lost the vote and won a different one.
The council had reached a compromise. Any A rank or higher guild with a non-standard composition must undergo a special certification within 6 months. Fail the certification, rank drops to C. The certification would include combat trials, tactical challenges, and designated dungeon raids, all conducted under royal observers, all recorded.
And Valyrian had personally volunteered to head the certification committee. He would choose the tests, he would evaluate the results, he would decide whether they passed.
Art sat very still. It was worse than a direct ban.
A direct ban could be challenged. The certification seemed fair, formally. But if your opponent designs the exam, you have already lost before you step into the room.
Selena touched his hand. She said she was sorry. She had tried to convince others at Golden Dawn, but Valyrian was too influential.
Art asked why she was here. If anyone discovered she had informed the outcasts, she would be expelled.
Selena replied that it was because Art was the first person who had ever seen her as a person, not just a class. When they were 10 years old and she was terrified before the altar ceremony, Art had told her that no matter what class she received, she would remain herself.
She hadn't forgotten.
Art walked her to the door. She paused at the threshold and told him the evaluation would begin in a month, and that Valyrian was already designing the trials. She didn't know what they would be, only that they would be hard.
Then she stepped into the dark and was gone.
Cain had heard everything through the thin walls. He asked what they were going to do. Art sat down at the table and opened his notebook. He said they would prepare, but not just for the certification, for the Grand Guild Tournament.
Cain raised an eyebrow. The tournament was held once a year. Only A-rank guilds and higher could participate.
If the outcasts passed the certification, they kept their rank and received admission. If they won the tournament, they gained veto power on the Royal Council.
And then, no law Valyrian proposed would ever matter again.
Art wrote on a blank page. Goal, the Grand Guild Tournament. Victory, veto power.
Below that, Step 1, pass the certification. Step 2, assemble the tournament team. Step 3, win.
Cain looked at the notebook and said it was madness.
Art replied that it was madness when he suggested a one-armed knight join a guild that didn't exist yet, and that had worked.
Cain smirked. He picked up his shield. He asked if training started tomorrow.
Art replied, "Training starts now."
They worked through the night. Art drew diagrams. Cain practiced strikes against the yard post. Lyra wove fresh threads. Grom lifted homemade weights. Pip trained cloud density variations. Zane meditated in the corner, learning to control the curse at finer and finer tolerances. Mora cooked broth.
Art divided the month before the certification into 4 weeks. each with a single objective. Week 1, Vulnerabilities. He used weakness analysis on all 43 guild members, one by one. Not just physical stats, stress patterns, error habits, moments when focus broke under pressure.
Cain's weakness wasn't his arm, it was his pride. He would rather absorb a hit than retreat, even when retreat was the correct tactical move.
Art ran 6 training sessions on tactical withdrawal. Not running, not retreating in panic, but pulling back 5 steps while keeping shield coverage over those behind him. Cain hated everyone. By the end of the week, he could do it without thinking.
Zane's weakness was fear of his own power. He had always held the curse back, afraid of striking his allies. If the certification forced him to strike at full power near teammates, he would hesitate at the worst possible moment. Art worked with Zane and Lyra together. Lyra wove a protective thread web around allies that absorbed 90% of the dark aura. Zane could release full power and not be afraid of what he hit. Pip's weakness was his age. 12 years old. After 3 hours at maximum effort, his skills began to falter. Art built him a rotation, 20 minutes active, 10 minutes rest, and Mora calculated energy bars with an endurance buff for every hour. Grom's weakness was isolation. Without Art's link, he was cut off. Gesture signals weren't reliable in battle. Art taught Thorn to transmit commands through ground vibrations. 3 stomps, retreat. 2 stomps, attack. 1 long vibration, regroup. Grom felt it through his feet, a backup system for when the main one broke down.
But the guild's greatest vulnerability was Art himself.
His ability only worked when he was calm and conscious. 1 blow to the head, and the guild went blind. Valyrian knew this. The certification would contain a trial designed specifically around that fact. Art couldn't make himself stronger. He was a 17-year-old boy with no combat class and an ordinary body, but he could prepare the team to operate without him. Week 2, Autonomy. Art began stepping away from command without warning in the middle of training battles. The first attempt, the team collapsed in 30 seconds. Cain charged forward alone. Zane struck blindly. Grom stopped, having no direction. Lyra tangled in her own threads. Pip's cloud swallowed his teammates. Second attempt, slightly better. Cain shouted orders out loud, rough and simple, but audible. Grom watched Thorn's hand signals. Zane anchored to Cain's position. Third, fourth, fifth. By the 10th attempt, the team could function without Art for 3 minutes. By the 20th, 5. By the end of the week, 10 minutes of autonomous operation without critical failure. Not perfect, far from perfect, but enough to hold a line until Art was back. Week 3, New Combinations. Every new guild member was a new element in the system, and new elements opened new possibilities. Lantern Bearer plus Glass Blower. Light through lens, focused into a cutting beam. A long-range attack without a single drop of magic. Dirty Water Controller plus Cleaner. Murky water plus a dust cloud equals a wall of dense mud. Opaque. Movement slowing. Blocks vision and blocks passage. Clockmaker plus Defender. 3 seconds of slowed time within a 1-meter radius, timed to Cain's shield strike. The blow arrived 3 times more slowly. Cain had time not just to absorb it, but to redirect it. Painter plus Tailor. Lyra's threads were invisible, but enemy mages could sense their mana signature. If the Painter rewrote the thread's mana into a different spectrum, even mages wouldn't detect them. Bellringer plus Porter. A sound wave directed at Grom's back. He couldn't hear it, but it pushed him forward like a second pair of legs. Already a battering ram. With acceleration added, a siege weapon. Art recorded 37 new combinations that week. Each one practiced at least 5 times. Week 4, Reconnaissance. Art studied how Valyrian thought, not how he fought. A systems thinker. A strategist. He wouldn't use crude tests of strength. He would create situations where the outcast's standard tactics couldn't function.
Split the group. Isolate Art. Cut communication. Strip the combinations at their root.
Art built a countermeasure for every scenario. Group split, each trio had an autonomous subplan. Communication suppressed, gestures and ground vibrations. Art isolated, Cain takes command. All abilities suppressed simultaneously, they fight like ordinary people.
Because over months of training, they had become something more than class holders.
They had become a team.
The morning of the certification arrived on the first day of the guild's 6th month.
Art stood at the window before dawn, looking out over Velmore. The city was waking, merchants opening stalls, guards changing shifts on the walls. A normal morning for everyone except 43 people on Blacksmith Street.
The team assembled in the common hall. Art stood before them and said only this: "Today, the people who consider you trash will decide whether you deserve to exist. The only answer that matters is the one you give on the field." Mora handed out breakfast, full set of buffs, maximum preparation. They walked to the Velmore Arena, an amphitheater on the eastern outskirts, cordoned off by the Royal Guard.
Officials, guild representatives from 5 major organizations, journalists from the Herald, and in the central box, seated in a high-backed chair, Lord Valyrian, Terran beside him, the full certification committee.
Art led the team into the arena, 43 people in formation. Cain forward with the shield, Zane on the right, Lyra on the left, Grom behind Cain, Pip behind Lyra, Mora at the rear with food containers.
Valyrian stood and looked down at Art from the stands.
He announced 3 trials. First, combat against 10 A-rank fighters from the Royal Guard Reserve. Second, a raid on a dungeon to be named the following morning. Third, a tactical mission conducted under conditions that suppress the guildmaster's abilities.
Art heard the 3rd trial and felt no surprise.
He had known Valyrian would come for him directly. He had spent 4 weeks preparing for exactly that.
Valyrian sat back down. The arena gates on the far side opened. 10 Royal Guard fighters marched out in formation. Enchanted armor, magical weapons, A-rank, each one. Art activated the tactical map and ran weakness analysis across all 10 simultaneously. 30 seconds. A balanced party. 3 swordsmen, 2 spearmen, 2 mages, 1 archer, 1 shield bearer, 1 healer. No obvious flaws at a glance.
But 30 seconds revealed everything. The oldest swordsman, an old left knee injury. A sharp blow from the right would buckle it. The second, a habit of leaving his right flank open when holding his offhand position. The third swordsman, youngest, nervous, gripped too tight on the sword. He would tire in under 2 minutes.
Art began relaying through the link, positions, weak points, assignments, the full picture flowing simultaneously to 43 minds. The 10 royal fighters had trained together for years. They were excellent. They were balanced. They were ready for anything a standard guild would throw at them.
They were not ready for this.
Because the outcasts didn't fight like anyone they had ever faced. Every move was connected to every other. Every class fed into the next. A machine with 43 moving parts, and Art at the center, seeing all of them at once. In the stands above the arena, Lord Valyrian watched, and for the first time since the ceremony at the altar of destiny, where a single word had appeared on a stone, the coordinator class began to show the world exactly what it meant. Not a fireball, not a blade, not a healer's light, something older and rarer and more dangerous than all of those combined.
The ability to look at 43 people the world had thrown away and turn them into something no one in Arcania had ever seen before.